como varios comenzamos, yo empezaba desde los 14 años. Piensan que muy fácil es el contrabando, va subiendo y los putazos aguantando, y está muy cabrón. Un momento voy a prenderme un tabaco, pa' seguirles con la historia que hoy les canto. El amigo la confianza fue ganando, cada día se fue más relacionando. Sigue firme hoy. Estatales con rango de inteligencia, en la tía me cayeron a la fuerza. 5 horas me tuvieron secuestrado, pa' acabarla me tumbaron una feria, la alcancé a librar. Pero es como todo, cuando está subiendo, rolan los mitotes, te cae el gobierno, hoy hasta la DEA me pide unos versos, quieren que les cante, yo no estoy de acuerdo. Hace poco un sheriff me torció moviendo, jale de trabajo, pa' que se los niego, casi estoy seguro que fue por un dedo, alguna madrina por aquí en San Diego. Y con esto nos vamos hasta Tijuana. Suena la marca registrada. 26 número de la camiseta, de los cholos el doctor para la empresa. Noticieros que difaman mi persona, ya le quieren poner precio a mi cabeza. No se va a poder. Mi San Judas en mi pecho va con tinta, ese viejo es el que a mí siempre me cuida. Una Glock 19 para defensa, está en uno pa' cualquier tipo de ofensa. No soy cagazón. En Cherokee me paseó por Chula Vista y también me la roló por San Isidro. Cuento con el amor de mi madrecita, con mi esposa estoy de más agradecido, mucho me apoyó. La historia es muy larga y el papel muy corto, son muchas hazañas y no me echo loco. A esos del gobierno les mando un saludo, ya se dieron cuenta que uso bien el coco. Para el compa Pavel y para el pelón, también para el Cruces y el Gavilanzón, pa' mi compa Búho, ahí va el saludón, también para Italia, a la orden estoy. Saben que no miento, que tengo razón, paren bien la oreja, presten atención, les dejé receta en esta canción, nomás pa' que sepan quién es el doctor.
Man, Benny, talking about the perfect song for today's episode, huh?
Yeah, it's the perfect song for the last 2 episodes. This one and the one for last week.
Oh my God. And I'm reading right here who it is. And you even put down on our notes, El Doctor. It's called El Doctor by Grupo Marca Registrada. Are they from Tijuana, Benny, or are they from San Diego? Do you know?
You know, for them to be singing that, they got to be from the TJ area.
Yeah.
Or at least from Baja California.
I'll tell you, man, that is the perfect song. Hey, guys, you know what? Before we get started, let's give everybody that's watching us, Michael Martinez, watching us all the way from Littleton, Colorado. Mike, once again, thank you, brother, for being right there with us. And has given shout-outs to those listening. And I'd like to give David and Benny's a shout-out for their book, When the Music Stops, The Pain Begins. Great reading. Thank you, Mike, especially coming from you, brother. Mil gracias. And we got Ceci, our sister from Riverside, that's been with us from the very beginning. We were Benny and I came on Sunday impromptu just to push this show, and within seconds, Ceci, you were there right by our side. Mil gracias. And we got Jim DeJanis, Batman, the legend the Pelican Bay legend, did over 17, 18 years. And I know I'm always killing the number, Jim, but he's watching us all the way from Thailand right now. And we got another brother that's been with us from the very beginning, Big VJ Juarez, watching us all the way from Long Beach, California. I collect Major League Baseball caps and T-shirts available. Oh, we'll talk about that, about our T-shirts that we're going to be selling in the next couple of weeks. And I know you're going to definitely going to buy one, but I think we're probably going to give you and Ceci one, and Chris Kilby. And guys, before I forget, Chris Kilby's been having a really hard time logging in, but I know without a doubt that Chris Kilby, San Diego PD's gang detective and robbery legend, is watching us. Chris, I know for whatever reason you still can't log on, but we love you, brother, and I know without a doubt you've been with us from the beginning. You're watching us as we speak, and we got our chaplain. We have a chaplain, guys. If anybody ever needs prayers, please let us know. You have our email addresses. Ruben Nava and his beautiful wife. Right now, the chaplain and his beautiful wife are tuning in to hear another banger, without a doubt. Brother Ruben, watching us. Prayers for today, reaching souls. Hello, everyone. Have a blessed day. Jesus loves you. I love to say that. And thank you for once again reminding us. Basilio Garcia, saludos from Chula Vista. Orale, Rafael Ortega, I just finished talking to you, a brother in Christ. Thank you, brother. I know it's your first time watching us. Hopefully you're going to log into us. Thank you very much. Ben Palillo's done my compadre on East Street next to the golf course. We were going at it for 2 years. Very interesting, Basilio. You're going to hear a lot of things that we talked about last week, but more in depth. And Gordo size if possible. We'll talk later. Big VJ Juarez from our T-shirts that are coming up. But Benny, I know you have some shout outs, brother. Let's start off with your first one. Here we go.
So one of the first ones we're going to do is Homegrown. That's up in Brawley, California. That's in Imperial Valley. It's run by Jose Hernandez. He's a great guy, man. He used to be a former correctional officer for CDC. He runs the place there. It's the only game in town. It's actually pretty much the only game in the Imperial Valley when it comes to Department of Corrections, attire, equipment. So go visit him, man. He's a good, great guy, man. He's a big supporter, and he loves law enforcement, man. And the other one is for San Diego PD Museum. We want to mention Steve Willard and Patrick Vincent. I was there this weekend, and dude, I'm telling you, this is a gem, a lost gem in San Diego. I mean, if you haven't visited that museum, you got to go out there and visit that museum. I mean, they got the history of San Diego PD. I mean, they got so much information, so many photos, so much memorabilia. It's really worth going out there and taking a look and just take a tour. I mean, I bet you that we probably spend 3 hours just looking at all the stuff, probably even more. But, big shout out to Steve and to Patrick.
Hey, I had the privilege to work around both of them. Actually, with Pat Vincent, the guy is a great guy. He's one of those guys, and he's the one right here with the red hair, with the glasses. He's one of those guys, Benny, that when you think about somebody that loves the job and never worked a day in his life, that's him. He's that guy that was a great cop, a good individual, and it just shows what kind of individual he is. He is now retired. I believe he's been retired for several years now, and he volunteers his free time there at the San Diego Police Department Historical Society. And Pat, I know you watch our show. Thank you very much. We're honored that you watch us, and we're going to have you on in the near future. And the other great legend that I had the privilege of, he worked on some of our cases, Operation Stampede and also Operation Cuetes. And I think he worked on some other cases when we were working in Mexico, was Steve Willard. That's the gentleman with the hat on and right over here with the suit. Once again, you know what? It was a pleasure to work with both of you gentlemen. Thank you for all the time and all the volunteer hours that you put there at the Historical Society. And thank you for watching our show, and thank you for pushing our show. And without a doubt, we're going to have both of you on in the near future. And thank you very much for taking care of my little brother. Actually, yeah, my little brother, but he's a little bit older than me, Benny Cruz. He told me that you guys were extremely professional and were gentlemen to him. Thank you for taking care of him.
Those two men are truly real lawmen, man. They're great. And by the way, Steve said you owe him dinner.
You know what? You're absolutely right. We worked Operation Stampede. I think it was like a 9-month operation. And Steve, after the operation was over, I promised him a steak dinner, and I never complied. But one of these days that I'm in San Diego, I've been saying it for, whoa, that's a long time, 20 years. I will, before I die, take him to a nice taco stand, and we'll have a steak dinner eating tacos. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
With that said, Benny, it's all yours, brother.
Well, tonight we have retired San Diego Police Detective Ron Newquist. He's joining us tonight. Ron brings 29 years of law enforcement experience. Ron worked patrols, street gangs, and investigations at Mid-City, was part of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, and was a homicide detective for 15 years. 15 years of seeing the ugliness that mankind can bring. I mean, today, Ron assists in major criminal investigations and provides expert opinions concerning DNA evidence and crime scene investigation. Ron is an expert in blood pattern interpretation, domestic terrorism, cold case analysis, shooting, fire death, gang-motivated murders, John Doe cases, dismemberments, torture, and degraded DNA analysis of dissolved human remains and officer-involved shootings. I mean, what a resume! This guy does it all, man. This is the model of every department when they're looking for a homicide guy. This guy does it all, man. And today we're going to be discussing Los Palillos gang. Los Palillos was an enforcement cell of the AFO in Tijuana. Los Palillos were involved in a series of violent crimes in San Diego County, including a series of murders. Ron was the case agent in some of those cases. So, Ron, welcome, and thank you for joining us, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, Ron, once again, man, it truly is an honor, brother, to have you on with us. We're looking forward. We're going to have a great episode, and thank you. Thank you for, I know you're on vacation, but even on vacation, you're willing to assist us. I believe you're in Hawaii, correct?
Yep, sitting in Maui right now.
Oh, that must be nice, man. But thank you, brother.
I was on the beach an hour ago.
It's nice.
So, Ron, can you share with us your upbringing, bro?
Yep, I grew up in San Diego. My father was a Navy officer. My family spent most of our life in San Diego. I was in Oakland for a few years before moving back and attending high school in San Diego. I lived in East County, grew up in El Cajon, Alpine area, played some junior college football at Grossmont. Thought that I was going to go into the pool construction business at one time when I was young, but I started leaning towards law enforcement. One of the things growing up out in East County, being so close to Mexico, is I spent a lot of time in Mexico. Even as a teenager, probably not the smartest move, but I was driving to Sinaloa, down to Sonora and fishing Huites, Bacarac, Comodero, El Salto. Spent 50 to 75 days fishing in Tijuana and Tecate at Presa Rodriguez and Carrizo. So I kind of got a little bit of knowledge of that narco culture. I knew what was going on. I'd been in the Sierra Madres fishing and seen literally planes landing on sandbars loading marijuana. And you don't look at them. You don't get out and pee next to a pile. You just fish and keep your mouth shut. But I also was very aware of the narco culture, like Jesus Malverde, the smuggler saint. I had traveled through the Sierra Madres and seen his actual shrine at one point on Diaz de Muerte, which was a huge celebration. I just happened to be down there. But I always thought in my career when I joined the San Diego Police Department in 1993 that I'd end up, going to the Narcotics Task Force. I didn't imagine going to homicide. I thought for sure that I wanted to go and I wanted to work the cartels and that would be the direction I went, but it didn't. So in 1992, I went to the Open Police Academy because there was a hiring freeze with the city of San Diego. I had also hurt my back playing football, and I wasn't sure the city of San Diego was going to hire me. I went through the Open Academy, and in 1993, myself and one other recruit were hired by the San Diego Police Department. So I spent, if you count the academy, it's over 30 years, but I was 29 years sworn with San Diego PD. 15 of those were in the homicide unit. I worked in the gang unit. I went to the Joint Terrorism Task Force for 3 years, but I finally ended my career with San Diego PD in the homicide unit, and that was just about 3 years ago. On June 10th of 2022 is when I retired.
Hey, Ron, let me ask you a quick question. You said you were going to Tijuana at a very young age, going to Sinaloa, going to Sonora, fishing. Did you go by yourself, or did you take a Spanish speaker with you? Do you speak Spanish?
I spoke enough Spanish to get by. I went with friends, usually one other guy, and we would tow a boat all the way to Sinaloa. At one point, we hooked up with some families down there, and we hired, when I fished in Bacharach, we hired cops from Durango. We paid them $80 for 4 days to sleep with us, basically camp next to us, I should say. And they camped next to us basically for protection. Again, I knew a lot of guys in the bass fishing community that were going down there throughout San Diego. I'm probably the only one I know that was never robbed down there. A lot of guys had some bad experiences, but being safety second and young, we were willing to take the risk to fish down there.
That is crazy.
I've been down there 7 or 8 times, and I literally have seen planes landing, just loading load after load, and watching the coves, 1.5 inch PVC pipes, 200-300 feet off the ground, going out to all the canyons and as far as you can see marijuana. But again, they knew we were down there to fish, and you kept your mouth shut. And then the families down there were the nicest people in the world, and it was hard for them because the cartels would build them churches, community centers, and just say, all we want you to do is farm poppies or marijuana, and they would leave them alone. So I understood that. We minded our own business. One of the guides I fished with, Renee, down there, was actually kidnapped, pulled out of the van, and murdered. I wasn't there, but it happened at a camp that I used to visit. So,
and Ron, how old were you when you were doing this?
I started going down to Mexico at 16, 17 to Tecate and Tijuana just to fish. And then, like I said, I joined a club in Tijuana, which was ran by a lawyer who also was the lawyer for Baby Rock, which now I would probably surmise he probably worked for the Arellanos.
Without a doubt, because Baby Rock, that was run by the Arellanos, yes.
Yes.
That is
was
crazy.
His last name. But
yeah.
Yep. So
well, thank God you're with us.
Yep.
It's a miracle.
It kind of gave me like the backstory. Yep.
And Ron, I have another quick question. How old were you when you went through the police academy and when you got hired by San Diego PD?
I was 22 years old when I went through as an open enrollee, and I just turned 23 like the week before when they hired me in August of '93.
Wow.
So I went to like a 3-week like refresher academy for policy, and then I went right into the field.
That's outstanding. Before Benny asks the next question, Chris, for whatever reason, he can't log in still. He says, I can't live chat. Ron is a legend. It was an honor to work around him and his wife, Tammy. She made a 16 bank robbery series. She spent hundreds of hours making that case. Much respect for him and his wife. That's from Chris Kilby, brother.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Benny.
So, Ron, tell us about your police experience before you worked the Balillos investigation.
So early on, I went straight to Mid-City. So I worked Mid-City Patrol in East San Diego, and that would have been the early 90s. So it was like, all that crash program from LA had pushed a bunch of the LA rock stuff down to San Diego. So it was the best of times. It was rock cocaine everywhere. Pursuits were a nightly thing. Shootings were frequent. I think the highest murder rate we ever had was that year when we had 190 in San Diego. I went to 3 homicides in one day as a patrol officer. There was a body dumped on Orange Avenue. I got to that one. And then after I was relieved from that one, a few hours later, a guy shot and killed his girlfriend in the backyard. And I was there. I was walking up to the house when he did it. And then as I was trying to go into the station, we had another shooting. So most of my career was down in Mid-City. And then I went to, from there, I went to the street gang unit as a gang detective. Or I worked detectives at Mid-City, then the street gang unit. And again, my whole goal was to get to narcotics task force. I mean, I wanted to go work those large drug cases. As a young officer, I'd go to Steve Duncan's, updates on the cartel, the Ariana Felix cartel, all the Tijuana stuff. And I tried to keep up to date with the intelligence that was provided through him. And, those were the experts at the time. So I kept notebooks and everything I could from all those briefings. But eventually I worked some unsolved Samoan gang murders. I went over to homicide temporarily to work on those, a drug rip murder, and I never left. So I did 15 years in homicide after that.
Wow. So, Ron, can you tell us who Los Balillos were? And how did you become one of the primary detectives in that investigation?
So, yeah, I'll tell you about Los Balillos, which is basically a criminal enforcement cell of the Ariano Felix organization. I know in your last episode, you talked to Jim Bird and Steve Duncan, and they filled in a ton of the intelligence. I became involved in 2007 when they dumped a body off of Palm and 805 by the Kaiser Hospital. And it was an obvious, I knew, I'd been around long enough. I'd been in homicide a few years at that time. I knew that this was a special murder. He had taser barbs in his back. He had been tortured and he was left to rot. So I knew. So that's how I got involved. But to go back to the original, who are the Palios? Palios means toothpick in Spanish. So the original enforcer or AFO security / enforcer was Victor Rojas Lopez. And he worked under Ismael Guerrero or El Mael and Ramon Ariano Felix. Now, to give you some perspective or to fill in the blanks that weren't filled in last week during the episode, a lot of these guys, it's a misnomer. A lot of these, this thing that this is crossover violence, the cartel's been crossing over all the time. Their kids go to our high-priced schools. They're in your yacht clubs in San Diego. They're down in Coronado. But these kids, they would party together. They were in high school. Some kids went to school in South Bay. Some went to school in Tijuana. And some of the families were very affluent and some weren't. But this particular cell, the Palios, when they were young, they were friends with El Mael's son. And he used to bring these young guys, take them to Disneyland or Magic Mountain. And as teenagers, they kind of got brought in as an enforcement cell. Next thing you know, they're teenagers carrying, automatic weapons and providing low-level security for the cartel. Now, Victor Rojas Lopez, because he was skinny like a toothpick, they called him a toothpick. And the reason the Palios were part of the AFO cartel but split off was because there was a dispute at this club Baby Rock, this really big disco that the cartel owned and frequented. Victor was asked by Ramon Ariano, you need to bring, I believe it was Monkey Edgar Frasco, who was part of another crew or part of the Palios crew, but mixed in. You need to bring him to answer for disrespect of, I believe, Cholo or Jorge Briseño. He didn't do it. So they had Victor executed. And then they started targeting other members of Victor Rojas Lopez's family. His younger brother, Jorge Rojas Lopez, then fled over to the U.S. side as they were trying to kill him, literally, flees to San Diego. And some of his enforcement crew, up to 17 of them, basically join him, and they are about to exact revenge through kidnappings, murder for ransom, and torture on several people that they believe remain loyal to the AFO. A little backstory of this is there are so many little fingers in this thing of betrayal where their own friends were working. They probably knew they were safer under the large umbrella of AFO than to join this splinter group exacting revenge in San Diego. So these guys move to San Diego and they start targeting basically marijuana brokers, cocaine brokers, and we'll talk about some high-end people that they tried to pick off, some of the money people in San Diego. But my involvement started in 2007 when we get a call in the afternoon. March 6, 2007, we get a call of a decomposing body in a Lincoln Navigator. And when we get to the crime scene, neighbors said, hey, this car has been left here for several days. This body's in severe decomposition with bloating, over the heat. It was a warm March week. But right off, we noticed that there were taser barbs stuck in his back, in the victim's back, Mario Balleon's back. And Mario was like a low-level, we find out later, he was like a low-level marijuana dealer that was brokering. We call low level, but in the cartel thing, it's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of marijuana. But he's brokering it back and forth with other people from Tijuana to San Diego to safe houses. But right away, the first thing you see is you got a victim profile. When you got a body dump, you got to figure out who your victim is. And initial reports when you reach out to people is, oh, he's a car salesman. All of us that have worked gangs and narcotics, how do you launder money? You go to the auction, you buy cars, and you sell cars. So that's what we're originally told. Within 48 hours of the investigation, we finally get the family to agree to meet with us in South Bay. We meet with the family. We can tell they don't want to talk to us. They're in fear. They literally just say, can you please leave it alone? we don't know what happened to my brother, but can you just please leave it alone? I'm walking out to my car, and one of the family members follows me out and whispers from behind, it was the A's. I said, excuse me? He goes, it was the A's, and that's all I'm going to say. So he basically tells me it's the Arianos. I immediately call Steve Duncan, and because I knew Steve had the expertise. Steve was busy. He's working the kidnapping working group because there's kind of these rumors of all these kidnappings going on, but law enforcement hasn't had a cohesive group coming together, to start piecing this together. So I call Steve and I tell him what I have, and then we start doing the obvious investigative steps, running phone numbers, seeing if these guys hit on any T3s. Is anybody working dope cases on these guys? And we start to develop a profile of who they might be related to. But right off, I get a call from a DHS guy, and they were awesome. So many agencies in this case just worked together, and no egos. We all got together, and they said, hey, can you come tomorrow and meet one of our informants, cross in to no man's land at the port of entry, and we're going to introduce you to this informant. He may have some information. So I said, sure, we'll go down there. The next day, I 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you guys know how busy. There's thousands of people at that port. I'm walking from my car, which I park a block away, and I'm approaching the port when a guy walks by me, bumps my hand, and hands me a note with 2 names on it. It says Omar Sarabia Calderon Pecas, and it says Chakatin Juan Arvizu. He says, these are your guys. These are you want to look at. But he doesn't say that. He just hands me that. And I'm like, hey, and he keeps walking. So I cross the border, and I meet with an informant. He hands me the other half of the paper with the same 2 names on it. It was just one of those weird things. So We knew right away. We start getting names. Now, Juan Arvizu or Chakatin, he's a name you'll hear about in this case. He's one of those guys that's betraying everybody, but he's a wicked man. There's even some information we developed where he was staying with one of these girls you'll see where she comes home and he put the puppy in the freezer. He had frozen the puppy because this guy's he's just a sick individual. And then Pecas is another guy whose dad, Sarabia Calderon's a big name in TJ. They have some money, but dad was picked off by J.C. Smith and the Marine Task Force years before with hundreds of kilos of coke. He gets out of jail. His kids only got a name because of his dad, but he's starting to go against his own friends. So basically, he set up Mario Bailon. Pecas tells Jorge Rojas and the other leader, Juan Estrada Gonzalez, hey, I can set up a broker deal for some weed. When he shows up, they kidnap him, torture him, and kill him. So this thing starts going full speed. I start doing the basic investigation stuff, calling everybody I know. I mean, I was a homicide detective for 15 years. It's not because I knew everything. I knew who to call. I knew to call Contreras. I knew to call Steve Duncan. I started getting on the phone. What do you have? Who do you know? And the basic steps, computer work. And I find out that some of these guys have been contacted or given traffic tickets in San Diego. So I was one of those not organized detectives that had papers everywhere around my desk, but I had a huge piece of paper and I just started making a chart connecting, field interviews to traffic stops to residences. And then as this is going on, we start hearing rumors of other kidnappings. And we find out that a guy named Ivan Lozano Jr., he's kind of more of a mid-level guy. He's connected to Cholo and TJ. He goes missing, and his family has a little bit of money, and they're worried about him. But they pay a ransom, but he does not show up. So in this case, there's all these kidnappings going on. Families are giving up hundreds of pounds of marijuana, Rolex watches, paying hundreds of thousands in drop money and ransoms. Some people were released, some you'll see get dumped, which you'll see some of the pictures later. But these guys start going full force. Now,
and this is all going on in San Diego?
It's all going on in San Diego. And this is just with Bailon. Now, at this time, I've reached out to Steve Duncan. So he says, hey, there's been a couple other murders. They're busy because Javier has been picked off in 2006. His trial's going on in San Diego, and his attorney, Bartek, is busting their balls with discovery. I want every piece of paper ever written in the FBI or DEA that basically indexes the Arianos. So try giving that up. So everybody's tied up working that. These kidnappings are going on. But Steve says, hey, back on August 15th in 2004, there was a van with 3 bodies in it. And these guys were dumped up off of Brandywine Avenue. And it was a telltale murder. I went back and started working it later. But These guys are decomposing. They had money stuck in their fingers, and on the side of the car there was the obvious cartel sign. It said El Tigrillo, and on the back it said Soy Tigrillo. So basically, it's saying the tiger or giving up Javier Arellano. Like, these are your people, and they stuffed them in there, stuffed money in their fingers, and let them decompose, in this car for several days. And until the real story behind that was some guy pulls up, check his map, he smells something, sees it leaking, he thinks it's a bunch of tuna, that somebody had caught a bunch of tuna and let them rot. And then they do further investigation and figure out it's actually 3 dead bodies in there. So we find out about that one. But Steve says, hey, we haven't heard anything. No one really reached out to us about that, but we're hearing that might be related through other sources that they can't give up because they're doing the giant case of the AFO. So they can't give up their sources. And then we also have the murder of Francisco Verdugo, who's dumped down there off of Telegraph Canyon. This is now 2005. So 2004, they do one late. Then in 2005, they dump him. And as you can see on the pictures here, another obvious cartel del Chapo, like this is Chapo's people. So I don't know if they were disrespecting him or because, to try to mock the Arellanos and say, hey, your guy was working for Chapo or not. I'm not quite sure. But this one, the sheriff's department reached out to Steve Duncan. At least someone rang a bell and said, hey, this looks like it's more than just a guy killed and dumped on the side of the road. So I started collecting that, as the first case agent. I'm like, let's start getting all those cases. Let's call those detectives and let's start, creating, it takes violence to solve violence. It's like in a gang case. You may not make that murder on that car, but you find out that gun's been used in another case or that car's been used, and you reach out and say, hey, what do you have? That's what we started doing. And this thing's starting to progress fast because Ivan Lozano is presumed kidnapped, and we're hearing about that. And I'm off call now, and my friend Brett Burkett, his team is up in the homicide rotation. I say, hey, Brett, good chance you're going to get another murder. There's going to be another body dump because we're hearing that Junior has been picked up. Sure enough, a few days later, Brett calls me, says, hey, we're rolling to a guy in the trunk of a car, and they find Ivan Lozano in the back of a Chrysler up there, up off of Balboa in San Diego, back by the old Family Fun Center, Balboa 805. And he's got toothpicks poured on top of his body and on his ass crack. Interesting point that didn't come up in your meeting last week. That car that was used, it was stolen from Chula Vista, but the registered owner was a police comandante from Tijuana who had been murdered months before, chained to, I believe, his friend or a brother, and shot over 100 times in the street. So there wasn't they didn't just use a car. They used a car that they knew meant something. And that car will come back later in some homicide investigation where we make an address based on car parts from the trunk of that car, from the spare tire. So this thing is going full speed. We now have Ivan Lozano. Within a day or two of his body being found, I'm in the office with Brett Burkett and a defense investigator working for Bartek. Now, Bartek is the federal defense attorney who's representing Javier in court, and Javier is in court during this week. This investigator, he doesn't tell us he's working for Bartek and Javier Arellano. He shows up at homicide and says, hey, I'm working with the Lozano family, and we're here to ask about Ivan, what happened to him. And so we tell him kind of what was going on, and we try to make links with Ivan's father so we can work the case. That night at 10:30 or 11 o'clock, the defense attorney, Bartek, who later becomes a federal judge, he asked Brett and I to come to his office and sit down. Unbeknownst to us, this investigator had been bringing Cynthia Arellano to court every day. And they were trying to protect the family because these kidnappers had tried to kidnap some other friends of theirs. And again, they start giving up Juan Arvizu, Jorge, who's now Polillo because his brother Victor is dead. So they start giving up this crew. We call it dry snitching, but this is dry snitching coming from the defense side in a way to protect their assets and their business. And I think because Cynthia Arellano was being escorted to court, she did not want any problems because the Polillos were up there. Now, as this is going on, San Diego PD my supervisors at the time did not like this case. They wanted us to give it to the FBI. Now, the FBI jumped on board right away. Once we find Lozano, word starts getting out there. You talk to Jim Bird, who was on here, the head of the anti-kidnapping unit, or one of the negotiators. He gets involved. Steve Duncan gets involved. They give me a FBI agent named Dean Gibney, young, squared away, clean cut. Your perfect FBI kid. This kid was a machine. He started indexing everybody and creating these reports of who's who in the cartel. We started doing open source stuff, and we saw that all these guys were partying in San Diego. They were hanging out at the airport lounge with these beautiful girls that were, in gangs, we call it set hopping, where they go from set to set. But these guys are cartel hopping. These guys got money. They're gonna get champagne service. They're gonna be throwing cash down. So we start identifying these guys in San Diego, and I'm trying to tell my supervisors, hey, we need to get on this. I knew right away this was my career case. I knew this was bigger than just a few body dumps. These guys, we find, I said, hey, the rumor is they're dressing up in police uniforms. They're kidnapping people. We were told about Lozano. He's dead. And then I'm starting to hear rumors. Steve Duncan, I think, reaches out to me, and we find out that Cesar Uribe and Mark Leon, two other guys that were marijuana brokers, they go missing. And the wife is reluctant to reach out, but she reaches out to Steve Duncan and says, hey, I don't want to get involved, but I haven't seen Cesar and Mark Leon. And now I'm fully involved in this. But I'm being told that I need to give it up to the FBI. And they're like, well, we're here to assist you, but you're the case agent on the murders. And my team was going through problems where people were leaving to the DA's office. My partner, Tracy Guadarrama, at the time, was giving her mom a kidney. So I was like the only one left on the team. But I was told I really couldn't work it. But as soon as I met Dean, myself and a DEA agent named Cameron Cortez, we started going out and doing surveillance. And I couldn't tell my boss that we'd be out all night till 4 a.m. I'd go back at 7. And we ended up almost getting killed the first week. We went to look at one of these guys' houses down off of Red Lion. It was about 11 at night. We drove in. A security guard at the gate, who was probably being paid off, let us in. We parked for an hour or two. And I'd say about 1 a.m, a SUV pulls up right within a foot of our window, stops, and there's nothing we could do. We were trapped at the end of a cul-de-sac watching a house through a mirror. But luckily, nothing happened from there. But it was one of those life lessons that no one even knew I was out there at the time. And then as I met with Steve and I started reaching out to the family, and I was writing warrants, but I had to write these search warrants and send them directly to the DA and not put them in my file because I was getting this blowback about working these cases. When I told them that Cesar Uribe and Leon had been kidnapped, and I thought they were probably killed, I was taking some heat to let this case go. You need to give it to the FBI, but that's not the way it works. So I started creating. I told you I created this giant poster, and one day after I was leaving work, and I wrote, "Does anybody believe these two guys are alive?" And I had pictures of Cesar Uribe and Mark Leon. And I remember my partner, who's now a captain at San Diego PD, comes in and goes, "Man, you're going to get booted out of here. You got to knock that crap off." I'm like, "Hey, I got a picture at this guy's ATM machine of one of the Polios using his ATM card a few days after he goes missing. This guy's not coming back." So at this point,
hey, Ron, this is like between 2004, 2007.
Yes, this is still 2004. This is March and April. This thing starts kicking into high gear. So
and the lieutenant
yeah. 2007. 2007 by loan ends up in the car in March. In April, we get Lozano's body, and then we start hearing about Uribe and Leon going missing and other kidnappings.
And the lieutenant in homicide at the time loved baseball without mentioning his name.
He did.
Yes.
And I know he was getting
yes.
heat from the Chief Lansdowne at the time and the Mayor Sanders. But I was literally brought in. I was brought in and told to shut my mouth. It's not your job to go find bodies. Literally, those are the words that were used.
Really? 2007. Okay, got it.
Yep. I was told, hey, this isn't, homicide rates. Law enforcement is the greatest thing ever, but when you look at crime stats, it's a Common Core math. Victims are up, but crime's down. And the homicide rate, mayors and everybody else, they live on that stuff. It doesn't matter the guys working the cases. You put a case in front of us, we work it. And this was the first time I probably was naive that if you got a murder in a case, you worked it. But this had a lot of politics. They thought it would affect tourism and all this other crap. So
yes.
So Lansdowne was even asked about it at one of the trainings, and he basically shut a young officer down and said, "We don't have a cartel problem going on." Because he said, "Hey, what about these cartel murders?" So all this heat was going on. But what saved me was I reached out to some other law enforcement people in the Marshals unit, and they had gone to do a felony warrant at La Vita Real in Little Italy. And this was a really nice condo complex. Bonnie DeManis, the district attorney, lived in that building. When they went in that building, they discovered that Chacatin was in there, Francisco Arellano, the son of the Arellanos, and several other cartels. So they FI'd everybody. Again, people hadn't put all this together yet, but we find these FIs. And I went from basically being told you're probably going to get kicked out of homicide because you won't shut your mouth, to I had a desk at the DA's office. And then they hand Marco Mercado, a DA investigator, they put him on the case. And it was like we'd been partners our whole life. The guy is a crazy, great investigator. And the second he hit the ground, we called it the ad hoc task force because it was Marco and I, along with Dean Gibney, the FBI agent, the young agent, who ends up just being a machine when it comes to organization and just doing the heavy work of the paper stuff, the side paper. And then Steve Duncan, feeding us information. And now we have Alex Haran from the FBI and the kidnapping working group, and we're starting to identify all these kidnappings and murders going on. So this thing gets serious. I go to the DA's office. We start working on it. We start doing surveillance. We're able to follow several of these guys, with DA investigators. And eventually we find out that Eduardo Tostado has been kidnapped. So now we're into June of 2007, and this kind of a higher level guy from Mexico, probably a kidnapper himself, very involved in the AFO. He gets kidnapped. He's lured and kidnapped by a very attractive woman, and he's being held hostage. There's ransom paid from the family, or they reach out and the FBI gets involved, and we start to find out. Now you're looking at the screen here at Nancy Mendoza, and we'll talk about her in a little bit, but she was the cartel bait. She'd go to the gym and work out, or go to the coffee shop, send provocative photos and meet these guys. But at one time or another, she dated the two bosses, the existing Jorge and Juan Estrada. So they kind of dated her, and although they had wives and they had other houses in San Diego, right next to the FBI building on Arrow Drive, they had a marijuana stash house, which was also the love nest for whatever these cartel girls that would jump back and forth would hang out at. So Tostado gets kidnapped. FBI gets involved. A ransom drop is we negotiate a ransom drop. The FBI follows it. We have SWAT teams from the FBI, San Diego PD, because now it's getting serious. Because they know these guys are dressing up from police. We're having bodies dumped. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because as we look at these murders, we realize that the Polios were involved in a big shootout back in 05, August of 05. There's a guy named Salvador Parra. He's a high-level marijuana broker / money launderer for the AFO. He's in Chula Vista. They plan to kidnap him for 2 days. So they try to get him. He's not there. The next day they go. They see him outside. A gun battle happens. He's able to shut his door to his garage and get in the house. They fire in. He calls 911. And these guys you see on the screen here, Jorge Marino on the right, Monkey on the left, Edgar Frosto, and then Jorge Rojas and Guillermo Marino, they were all driving this red Suburban that they jump in right after they try to shoot at Parra. As they're fleeing, this officer in the middle, Diamampo, sees him. He gets into a chase. He chases him up to Medical Center Drive, and your worst nightmare is a cop. These guys jump out in a tactical formation, and they do a U-turn, as he's going into the entrance to chase him of a shopping center, and he's face to face. He crawls to the back of his car as they unload on his police car. And basically, he survived. These two guys you see on the screen, Monkey and Jorge Marino on the right, who, by the way, is kind of the guy on the right. Marino is the only street gang member, South Bay gang member, not more a cartel guy brought in, but originally he's a street gang member. He bails on foot from out of the red Suburban. These two guys run on foot. Jorge just walks away. His wife happened to be shopping there, and he gets in the car and he gets away scot-free. These two guys are caught, but Guillermo Marino, Memo, takes off in the Suburban. Diamampo, even though he's just been pinned down and by the grace of God survives, he jumps in another police car and the chase is on. But Guillermo goes the wrong way on the freeway in the Suburban, and takes it into Mexico where he dumps the car. And then Steve Duncan later learns where it's at. Chula Vista gets it and gets that car. One of the things we missed, all of us in the investigator, that car came back to an address where multiple people were tortured and murdered. And that we follow up on that about 4 years later. But so that's kind of the backstory. So all these agencies, the FBI, San Diego PD, Homeland Security, multiple SWAT teams, I think there's 70 of us out on June 16th of 2007. And a ransom's been paid, but we lose the surveillance. For a little while, we lose the car, lose the money, which is probably the best thing ever because we don't get burned. The FBI picks it back up, and the bosses are seen. They get the ransom money. They go to a high-end store, Neiman Marcus or something, and they buy clothes for Tostado like they're going to let him go, and they let him dress. But he's been held in this closet and tortured, shitting himself literally in this house on Point Doom. So FBI follows the car back to Point Doom. Before it gets there, they flashbang or they put explosives out with the SWAT team. They take down Jorge Rojas and Juan Estrada Gonzalez, the two bosses left. They still have to hit the house. Now, had they made it to the house, this would have been a crazy shootout because that house had suitcases in it full of automatic weapons and assault rifles and handguns and magazine, everything. They had an arsenal. As you see her up on the screen, this is what the house is hit by SWAT, this house, and they find all that in the house. Now, this stuff later on, my wife Tammy Ballard ends up being she's the DNA analyst on it. So at that time, it was the largest DNA request ever. But we started swabbing everything from the magazines to the handcuffs. We identified Mark Leone on the chains and handcuffs. And he was one of the guys that had been missing. So we take down this whole house, we arrest Carlos Pena. There's another guy. He's Memo's younger brother, who we'll talk about. His name, he goes by Puppet. He's in the house, but they tried to make it look like when they walk out of the house, when SWAT surrounds it, they try to make it look like they're the kidnap victims. But they're all taken down. They rescue Tostado alive. We go in this house, and this is like a treasure trove of working all the cases backwards. So that house is searched by FBI. There's another house hit down the street, which is the boss's house. I go there. I find multiple handguns there, walkie-talkies, other, paperwork that we use in the case later, but just a treasure trove of weapons. What we don't find are the tasers that they've been using. When they kidnap people, they tase them, and when they tase them, it shoots out these little aphids, which they look like confetti, but they have a serial number on them, and they go to that taser cartridge, and you can figure out who buys it. So if you look with a magnifying glass, you can see that. So, but we get lucky. A day or so later, the owner of the house that had been rented goes back, and as they're moving the couch, the taser falls out of the armrest. And that taser eventually, I guess I'll skip to that, but that taser, we're able to go back and calibrate it years later. So we make sure it now matches the date and time we have. And we're able to see each kidnapping, how long they held down the button, when they dry stunned victims. So it ends up just being this digital roadmap of when people were kidnapped and how many times they got shocked and how long they held down this electric shock.
So these guys used one taser on all 17 cases?
Well, I think there was two tasers total, but we were able to calibrate them and use them. So
wow.
But we're hitting multiple houses, including the stash house by the FBI building. It's crazy. So this is all going on. We take them down. We laugh later because we get back a bunch of the ransom money, what they didn't spend on clothes, but not all of it. And these guys later hired Jan Ronas, and anybody that's worked big gang cases or dope cases, he's a cartel lawyer, or he's the guy when you have money you hire. He kept asking for the car back that we impounded, and the money was wrapped in rainbow, colored rubber bands. We always thought he had a drawer in his house full of rubber bands because that's probably how he got paid, because they got the car back and probably got the money out from under the dash. But anyways, we take all these guys down. This task force is running full speed. I'm working the murder side of things, but I can't say enough about Marco Mercado. He's doing the dirty work. Now jail phone calls start. Looking at jail mail, paperwork, trying to identify Nancy, because Tostado talks about this girl that he met. He was introduced to her by this guy named David Valencia. And he introduces them, and this girl says, "Hey, why don't you?" He's married, but she's young, and all of a sudden he got more attractive. To at least he believed that. Come on over, and he knew what he was going into. play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So he gets kidnapped and he's in that house, but we rescue him and he semi-cooperates and he tells us what's going on. Also, the family provided us with some surveillance footage before his kidnapping. Chakatin had gone to the house and dropped a note at the door and said, hey, I know who's going to kidnap you. If you pay me, several $1,000s, they won't kidnap you. So we had this perfect picture of Chakatin, one of the main members, dropping a note at the front door of this house. So this case is now full speed. We have these guys in custody. We're charging kidnappings, but we still have Mark Leone and Cesar Uribe outstanding. So we go 6 months before Marco Mercado and James Fontaine, one of the district attorneys, they're doing some of the peripheral kidnapping stuff. They identify a guy named Yorte that had been kidnapped. They eventually go to Guadalajara, and he names Jorge as his kidnapper, Guillermo as a kidnapper, and Juan Estrada. So he says, these guys are my kidnappers. They end up doing a case on it and getting an indictment, at least to get warrants in the system for everybody. And Steve, as you'll remember, Marco identifies a house in Del Sol. And I think you were on the team on GST that took him down hiding in the closet when we took down Guillermo Moreno. Mm-hmm. This is in January. So we still haven't found Mark Leone and Cesar Uribe, but this thing's about to hit high gear. So I don't know. You remember that, right? You guys took him down?
Yes, we did. Actually, I wasn't in GST 2007. I was, we had Southern Division. I was a gang sergeant. Steve Riddle, Rart Lovio, and all my team. We went to that house in Del Sol, and that's where we took him down. He rabbited in the black back closet, and we took him down from there. Guillermo Moreno was his name.
At the time, he had already switched up, man. Even though these other guys have been caught, now he starts working for the Sinaloan cartel, and he's doing, according to what he's telling us, he's doing 40 to 60 pound, meth and coke loads. And I had no reason not to believe him because that night after he gets arrested, Marco calls me and says, come on down. We got memo. We're going to interview him. We interviewed him. I didn't even tell my bosses. We interviewed him all night. And as Marco said it best, he talked himself into a life sentence. He started giving up multiple murders. He admitted to melting Cesar Uribe and Mark Leone. I mean, literally telling us how they got a 50-gallon drum. They got muriatic acid, caustic soda. They went to Home Depot and bought one of the turkey roasters, put it up on bricks on a house on Garber in Southeast San Diego. And him and his brother and these guys strangled them to death and then stuck him in a barrel. And he actually talked about pushing him down with a 2x4 to stir him because he wasn't melting fast enough. At one point, he goes out and buys $100 worth of carne so they can barbecue it in the back so the neighbors don't smell what's going on just for the smoke. So he admits to that. He admits to the triple murder. He gets into more detail later. So like I said, this was an interview that went the entire night into the next morning. And you walk out of those interviews high-fiving, but then I go back to the PD and give them the bad news. I think the big worry was where Cesar Uribe and Mark Leone, and hopefully they weren't killed in San Diego. I don't think they were excited about us, having a big break in the case. I think they were more worried that we'd up the homicide rate with more bodies. So Guillermo gets a lawyer, and in 3 months, in April of 2008 now, they agree to a free talk where this guy, or King for a day if you're on the Fed side, this guy, he's going to talk to us and tell us what they did. We do 3 solid days of 8 hours of free talk. We bring in the original Chula Vista detectives on the triple murder. And I remember one of the questions, they're like, hey, what'd you do with the key to the van after you dumped the bodies? Because he talked about strangling them and shooting one of the victims in the stomach. He goes, I left it on the floorboard, and there was a single key right under the the floorboard under the dash. So he went into detail about the kidnappings, the murders. He was there and helped murder Leone and melt them. They brought up a pozole maker from Mexico. They melted him. Next thing I know, there's like 10 of us with security on a field trip, and he's going around San Diego pointing out addresses, and he points out along the border a ranch down there, but it's right in the Tijuana River Valley, that area that floods all the time. It says, hey, I know they were buried on this ranch. So I go there, but I mean, this ranch is 20, 30 acres total, and it's among a lot of other ranches. So we can't go dig up the whole ranch. We brought some dogs out there, didn't find anything. It wasn't until his younger brother decides to free talk. I'd say about a year later, Carlos Pena comes to the table and his attorneys say, "Hey, we want to talk." When these guys are free talking, they're still looking at sentences that they end up getting later on of 30 plus years, but it stops them from life. But we end up getting Carlos Pena, and we do another field trip. And he says, I brought the bodies here in a truck. We used a backhoe to dig a hole, and we dumped them in this hole. So I bang out a search warrant the next day, and literally, I think it was October 9th, 2009. So now we're 2 years into this thing before I finally, myself, Paul Conley, Marco Mercado, the DA's office, FBI, we go down there and we start digging. We get down 2 or 3 feet, and these guys are smart. They put animals on top of them. So we had to bring out an anthropologist, get the animals out, and then we got to the bodies, which basically were like soap. It's the same way you make soap. When you make pozole, if you've been to Mexico and you know that smell of the soap, it's got that sweet smell in those homes. It smells good, but it's basically animal fat. They use lye, caustic soda, and acid. So these things came out like large strawberries. And, we put these bodies in barrels. My wife eventually IDs Cesar Uribe through familial DNA. Here's one of the barrels we put them in. We were worried we were going to step in the barrel, but they had poured them out. And the best describe it as a large strawberry or piece of soap. And then once we get them to the medical examiner, as the atmosphere is getting to them from being out of the ground, it's such a weird, they start to see here. So this is actually what the melted bodies turn into this, for lack of a better word. Somebody asked me, "Hey, are those steaks?" And then up in the upper left-hand corner, you see what bone material was left. Some of the denser bone made it through, or probably when they dumped them out, the stuff that didn't settle and the caustic stuff didn't decompose or rot out. And you can see on the bottom right, that's my shovel going into the ground as it splits. And that was the first thing I noticed, or my shoe going into it. But it was pretty unreal. That was the first known case of bodies being melted by the cartel on this side, which was their mistake. Had these guys started dumping bodies in Mexico, they probably could have gone a lot longer, but they got cocky and they just started dumping them, in neighborhoods throughout San Diego.
Hey, Ron, Sean Murphy's asking, was that the ranch off of Sunset Lane and Monument Road?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sean Murphy's asking.
Now, gosh,
yeah. Sean Murphy's asking, was
it's right there off of Dairy
Sunset? Okay, Sunset Lane and Monument Road. That's it.
Exactly. It's the ranch on Sunset Lane. And a lot of cartel members, it looked like a crappy ranch, but a lot of guys were keeping horses there, gambling there. I'm sure there was coke deals done there. Loads were probably transferred there. But these guys were all frequenting this. Nothing nice of a ranch. When you see the pictures, it's nothing nice. But they were all going there. All these guys that were drug traffickers and kidnappers and, different parts of the AFO.
Go ahead, Benny.
Go
ahead.
Pena brings us back there. We get those bodies. Carlos Pena brings us back there. We end up digging up those bodies and eventually IDing them. And then as we get DNA, my wife is matching these guns. Mark Leon, one of the melted bodies, we got his DNA on the chains and handcuffs that they were using. And so we were able to ID him on those. And Carlos Pena gave us the address on Garber. We had been in that area when Cameron Corte was following the boss and he U-turned on her. Another case where we got lucky, no one was hurt. She was alone and started following him, and they brought us to Garber. Even though Yvonne Lozano was tortured and murdered here, I was not allowed after we found all this out, we recovered them. San Diego PD did not allow me to go do this crime scene. I said, this is my crime scene. This is where they killed my victims. Marco Mercado and other people went and processed it. When I got off work, I called the owner and went back and took my own pictures. The owner had came to San Diego PD months before and said, "Hey, I think there's some drug stuff going on." He took pictures of his garage. And some of these pictures you have of the muriatic acid in one of the garages. Yeah, that's it on the top right. There's muriatic acid on the shelf at the bottom. And then in the bottom right, you see that circular thing. And that's the insert of that Chrysler. That came when they stuffed Yvonne Lozano in the back of the car and dumped him on Balboa. They took that out. So this owner took these pictures, thank God. But when he went to tell the front desk at Southeast, they're like, hey, we're too busy. An officer had been hit by a car that day, and they blew him off. So officers might have walked into this house and had no idea that multiple kidnap victims, some up to a month, had been held up in the closet. So some crazy time. This center picture, it's hard to see, but the center picture is the ATM picture of one of the suspects walking up and basically stealing the victim's money out of his ATM. That was a guy named Jesus Becerra. And then you see on the bottom right, that was sunset. That's Paul Colley and I, getting the bodies out of the hole. But that's what that ranch looked like. And this ranch is huge. So it's not like you're just going to go there and put a shovel in the ground. It wasn't until Pena said, hey, it's 4 feet from this corner, 4 feet. And they put him deep. I mean, they buried him deep. So so this thing now is full speed, and we're taking people down. People are on when we did the takedown, Billy Cahill, rest in peace, great guy. He was on his own trying to follow and chase Chacatine. He chases him to Old Town. We lose him. He later flees to Mexico. He's arrested there, picked up, and he pays off the cops, and he's still in the wind down there. But he got away that day. And we start putting together all these murders, doing search warrants on everything from everybody's trash to cable of all, I call them the non-sexy warrants. This is how you make cases. You do cable, you do trash, you do water of any house that these people were ever associated with. And we basically built this puzzle. And I'm not exaggerating. And the DA team that worked this, Mark Amador, I was lucky because I was calling him early on. He had done the Mexican Mafia. He had done a lot of the big Lincoln Park cases. I said, you need to be on this as soon as I got it. He formed this team, but this case ended up being hundreds of thousands of pages in discovery by the time we get to trial.
Wow.
And another piece, not only was I not allowed to do that crime scene, I was told I needed to get Chula Vista case numbers. And that really was not a good argument for me, because I'm like, listen, we don't get case numbers based on where people's families live. It's where the crime occurred. And we knew they had been murdered and melted. We had the guy confessing that he melted them on Garber Street. So I was not allowed to go in there. So as this is all happening, they also point out an address, a really nice condo. This is years later, 2009. They point out a condo on Paseo Aurora, which is again down by Palm Avenue, pretty close, right where they dumped Omar, which will make sense here in a minute. I don't have really enough PC. It was just one that they knew they used, but it was for sale. So I contacted the real estate agent. At the time, Tracy Guadarrama, my partner, had come back. We go down there and ask to see the house, like we're interested in buying it. I'm talking to the real estate agent. I'm standing in the kitchen. I look down in the crack of the tile. I see an aphid for a taser. I pick it up, and I shit you not, I get on the phone. I said, somebody get the homicide book, look at the evidence and tell me. And it was the matching serial number. So then I start walking around, and this agent probably wants to kill me because I just ruined her real estate deal, because now we've got a 3-day crime scene processing. We end up finding in the cracks of the garage where they do the spacing for concrete, we find more aphids, because when they had tasered Mario Bailon, they had stuffed him in the car, probably got him in the house, and then took him from the house where they were doing the deal to the garage and then dumped him. These aphids were all over. So again, we're getting lucky on all this. And then Marco identifies a house on Elder Street in Chula Vista, Mercado, where they killed Ricardo Escobar Luna, which is another body dump they did in Chula Vista that we worked, and Olkeen. He goes back years later, and he finds blood stain pattern, blood on top of the ceiling fan, on the walls. And then, like I said, all these warrants showed that Guillermo Moreno was there. Another one of the Plios guy was paying a bill there. So this thing went on for years. And what's interesting is it's probably the only San Diego murders that if you open up the San Diego murder G drive where they keep all the cases, because of the blowback and what was going on, we really ran this investigation out of the DA's office. So you look at the cases in the file, you don't see much, but it's hundreds of thousands of pages of all these units from the FBI, Alex Horan's kidnapping group, Jim Bird. I mean, this is a case where everybody was on the same team. This is the way it should work. And I take no credit for being the case agent other than I wasn't going to let go, and I was able to work with great people and detectives that cared. We were working every day of the week, 18-hour days, and this went on for months and months. It's not great for the home life, but that's what it takes.
Hey, Ron, how were the court proceedings? We see right here Jim Byrd, he testifies as a court expert. I'm sure Steve Duncan and many others testified as cartel experts. Jim, I believe, was testifying as a kidnapping expert. How were the court proceedings? And then we'll go into they all pled guilty and tell us what type of sentences they got. Tell us about the court proceedings.
Okay. So the court proceedings were wild. So first thing we do is we indict. You see up here Jorge Rojas and Juan Estrada Gonzalez. We indict them on kidnappings. They do a quick trial, and basically they get a life sentence for Eduardo Tostado for the ransom one where we ended up rescuing him alive. So just right away, just to tie them up, we do that. Jim Byrd testifies as the kidnapping expert. Steve Duncan testifies as the AFO expert, and then I testify based on prior acts under the street, 182 PC. I do the gang allegations. So I basically document Palios as a criminal street gang along with the cartel gang. So I'm allowed to use all the expert gang evidence in the case, and also for enhancements for all the firearms. So we all testified. We end up charging all these people with murder. It was a 14-month death penalty trial. That was crazy. When Tostado went to trial, as soon as that case for his kidnapping goes to trial, the first day, people in Mexico go to his restaurant, dump a body in front of it, and shoot one of his workers in his restaurant. And then they put a big sign up at the U.S.-Mexican border, a full-size billboard of our victim calling him a kidnapper. We had jurors drop out the first day of that kidnapping. When we get to the 14-month murder trial, because it ends up being death penalty, this thing you have 5 attorneys. The defense is Jan Ronis, Mary Ellen Attridge. So any of us that have heard cases, she's a ball buster and she's great. Yeah. She's going to kick your ass in court if you don't know what you're doing. Ricardo Garcia, who him and I battled for months on end. He's now the head public defender for LA. Great attorney, but he is going to ruin you if you don't know your case. Al Arena. So the case goes on. Crazy stuff that happens in the trial. Al Arena, one of the defense attorneys, he has a girl that he's representing. She comes into court. She falls in love with Juan Estrada Gonzalez. She tries to smuggle in a handcuff key to him. We try to kick her out of court. The judge, who I won't say anything about him at this point because I still have a consulting business. He personally marries Estrada and this girl later on. The court reporter falls in love with Jorge. She drops out of the case. We don't know why. All of a sudden she goes missing. Then we find out she has 1,000 emails, falls in love with him, quits her job, and she moves to be close to him. So we got that going on. Meanwhile, Marco Mercado's out chasing Nancy down in the middle of this. He IDs her through what I would say Marco's greatest police work of a picture in a jail cell, some jail phone calls, going to 24-hour fitness and trying to find a girl named Nancy, getting a contract, and he ends up picking off Nancy. So there's a ton of stuff going on. There's a trial going on, but it's crazy. During the trial, the gang member you see there in glasses, Jorge Moreno, he hits up a Nuestra Familia guy in prison and says, "Hey, you're getting out soon." They do a murder for hire to kill Mark Amador, the DA. He gets out. He ends up semi-cooperating. They follow him. They don't charge that case because this case had so many murders in it, they wait. Later on, Jorge tries to get someone else, and they get him for trying to murder for hire to try to go after the DA. So we have all that going on. Try babysitting a jury for 14 months and not losing them, because that's impossible. You have people drop out. You'd have to start all the way over if you go through your alternates. And then you have juror members that are afraid of the cartel, but it was a wild case. Memo testified on we flipped him. You're not going to do a huge case with this many suspects without a cooperator. Imagine playing in an all-star baseball game that you remember your whole life. Now tell me what all the other players on your team did. So when Memo gets on the stand, he's going back years, but he had a great memory. But sometimes it's a little tough because it's like, oh yeah, I remember now. You were in the red van with the FBI uniform on, So this thing went on for months and months and months. We all testified dozens of times. We had to hide the cooperators. Pena and Memo had to be hidden under different names, moved from different prisons and facilities, and just the protection alone was insane. So now the marshal's office, who I can't say anything but great things about, where this was a security nightmare for court every day. So it went on. Most of the bosses all got life sentences. Some of the people have not been caught. There's a Mexico tax, I call it. So a few of them already been killed down there. You know, like I said, you play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Mexico is slowly through attrition. 2 of them been killed. One in Juarez, one in Tijuana have been killed. Chacastín's still outstanding. Omar Sarabia Calderon here, the number 2 guy, kind of wearing the V-neck like hoodie. He's outstanding, but he's running around TJ right now. Everybody knows him, and he set up most of the victims. Eventually, I believe he'll be caught, but I would probably surmise that the Mexico tax gets him first, because there's family members out there, there's people out there, and his name was out there through everybody.
And this
the guy that melted the body,
Juan Loreño Ciso Chaquetin, he's still outstanding?
Chaquetin is still outstanding. He's running around Mexico. Like I said, we had him at one point, and probably through AFO connections, he got let out. He was caught with a gun. He was held down there. We were going to pick him up, and then he was let out. But he's still out there. A little interesting thing. You see that photo there of Chaquetin on the left? In the movie The Accountant, that was slipped in there as kind of a thing to get his face out there.
I saw that.
When you see the movie The Accountant, he's one of the Gambino family fugitives.
Uh-huh.
You know, a little tact on the federal side to kind of use Hollywood to get that out there. But he's in there. Nieto, the guy that helped cook, he's out there. The third guy, Altamirano Lopez, he's a cousin. He gave up his house in the triple murder in 2004. So he was friends with one of the victims. These guys, like I said, man, this was the ultimate betrayal of, are my allegiances to the AFO or my friends, or who's going to kill me? So he lured him to his house because they had gone to Seattle to pick up $500,000 of dope proceeds. They were going to spend the night and then move the money in traffic. It's smarter to move in the morning when there's thousands of cars. So they spend the night, but the Polios are waiting in there. He's still outstanding. I imagine he's in hiding in Mexico because he was working with Polio. So AFO in general would probably not want him around. But if he's alive, he's probably hiding in some other state in Mexico. And the guy on the far right is a peripheral guy he's called the Monroy. They call him the architect. He's still out running around. But the first 2 from left to right, Chaquetin, he's multiple murders, kidnappings, and then Omar Sarabia Calderon. He was easy to get. The day we did the takedown, he had done some check fraud in some federal, like a person from the Postal Service left a card on the door and he thought it was the feds. So he fled, or we would have got him just by fluke. So that's why he fled to Mexico. And I used to mess with his sister because she was on Facebook, and I'd say, "Hey, we're going to get your brother." And she did not like that. But they're out there. A bunch of them are out there.
So Ron, what are some of the lessons learned from this case? And also, what are you doing today now?
Well, I mean, the biggest lesson in this case is I don't care who you are, what team you're on. These big cases, I said it before, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I mean, I was smart enough to learn from those older gang detectives I worked with, the Steve Duncan, the FBI guys. I had done a lot of murder trials. I knew which DAs to call, but a lot of it was, no case. We always thought, the cartel's untouchable. They're not in San Diego. They are in San Diego. I won't get into it today, but they cross so easily across the border. They would even ride a horse and have a guy in a black sweatshirt ride a horse. He'd get on the horse, get on the metal wall, jump, and within a second, the cartel member would get on the horse down at Dairy Mart and ride. But so the big lesson is this was a teamwork case. This was the FBI, Marco Mercado, Steve Duncan, all of us. The DA's office was insane, working with us. And then today I'm retired. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I get paid. I went through the fire academy last year at 55 in South Dakota. So I work for a small volunteer agency up there, but we're paid per call. And then my wife and I do a lot of teaching. We have a crime scene and consulting business, Streamline DNA and crime scene consultants. We teach at a college in the Midwest. We do blood stain pattern interpretation, crime scene investigation. Then my wife's the DNA side of the business, and she had the DNA on this case, and did some incredible work. And like I said, in this picture here is from left to right. That's Marco Mercado on the left, and the tan suits, James Fontaine, Steve Duncan, everybody's friend. Everybody loves Steve.
A legend. Yeah.
Yeah, a legend. And that's my giant Swedish face. And then Mark Amador in that blue shirt. And then on the far right is Owens. We had 5 DAs on this case. Rob Ekret and I believe Chris Lawson also helped on it. And if we ever get these other suspects, it's probably going to be some young DNAs with hundreds of thousands DAs, excuse me, with hundreds of thousands of pages of discovery to go through. So, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm like, I work a little side business, not much. I want to work enough to pay my property taxes. I launched my boat 37 times in 1 year, so I'm not working too much. My son
Are you still going to Mexico?
I don't go to Mexico anymore. I don't.
Okay.
No, I only. Well, I'm no longer living near the border. I'm looking at going down there maybe in the future, but not like I was when I was young and dumb and reckless.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was lucky. But I've been down there. I went to Tecate probably 50 to 75 times, and I used to camp there by myself. But it was worth it at the time.
Hey, Chris Kilby sends his respect, man. A big shout out to you, Chris Kilby.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah. Yep. Sorry, I missed you on the live feed, but I see you every once in a while. But I'm married. I love in retirement, but I work just enough. Like I said, I turn down more cases than I take. In fact, I turn down the majority of them. And do a lot of free consulting where I'd say, hey, your dude's guilty, or this is where you should go, or my wife explains the DNA side of it.
Hey, Ron, you know what? It was an honor. It truly was, man, to have you with us. We want you to come back because I know there's a lot more other cases we can talk about. And but thank you very much. You know what? I was telling Benny that I never had the honor to work with you, but I would always hear about you. When you came on in '93, I was still working Logan Heights Patrol with Van Cruz, Chris Kilby, Mark Tallman, Cristano. We had a good squad, and we would hear about you guys.
Those are all the guys we looked up to.
Oh yeah, well we would hear about you when you went to Mid City, and you guys were just as great as the people that I was working with. And throughout my career, I was telling Benny that I would always hear about you, but we never got a chance to work together. But you know what? Thank you, man. It was an honor to have you on our show. And thank you for all those years of service. Thank you for all the hard work and for providing the service to the citizens of San Diego. It was an honor to have you, brother. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would do it all. The best job in the world. Most fun I ever had.
Without a doubt. Benny, any last words? Oh, go
ahead. Incredible investigation. Yeah. I mean, high profile case. Incredible. Great job, man. Tell Tammy that we want to get her on our show. We want to know about her too. I bet she's got tons of stories, I bet,
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't answer the phone when I call you if you're climbing rocks.
Yeah. I was up on about a 1,500-foot cliff when you called yesterday.
Yeah. I said, hang up. Don't be talking to me. I didn't want you dropping,
Yeah.
So thank you again, Ron. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, brother. God bless you, man. Be safe.
You too, guys. Be safe. Take care. Best of health.
Wow.
What an incredible
talking about a legendary case and a legendary detective. I mean,
incredible investigation.
Yes, it was.
Dude, can you imagine all those years and hours, man hours, and I mean, just keeping track. How many binders were involved in this thing?
Yeah.
I was always known as a binder guy, and people would laugh at me when I had a 3-4 binder case. I mean, this must have been. I mean, oh my God, unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. And you know what, Gordo Gordito, you're absolutely right. Chris Kilby just mentioned that too. This needs to be. Hopefully, they'll make a movie out of this. When you hear about Sicario and all these movies, dude, they're based on stories like this. You know what I mean? And once again, and this is why we have the show, so we could bring legends like this, and these legendary stories will never be lost. But with that said, Benny, tell us who we have next week.
And David, these are the stories we can talk about. Can you imagine the ones we can't talk about?
Yeah,
there's tons of stories. So next week we got Fernando Puente from the El Bordo podcast. We had him before. The guy's a dynamic guy, man. Yeah, he lives in the U.S., hangs out in Tijuana. That's where his podcast comes from. He's got tons of friends out there, connections. Fernando wants to share his story of the night that he and his friends were kidnapped, beaten, and extorted by the Mexican police in Tijuana. Yeah. Fernando said he honestly thought he was going to get executed that night. So don't miss it. Let's listen to Fernando's story. Dude, this is a scary story. If it can happen to somebody who speaks Spanish, He hangs out over there, knows the culture. Can you imagine what could happen to one of us or a tourist? I mean, a normal tourist.
I can't wait. I can't wait to have him on the show, Benny. I like listening to him now. And he has a lot of really interesting guests on his show. And Benny,
Yes.
and with that said, guys, tomorrow night, every Wednesday on Ash Wednesday, we have a new segment which is going to be at the end of the show. It's called Ask Sean, and that's his email, asksean3294@gmail.com. So please write it down. If you have any questions at the end of our show, before we give our fatherly advice to those that want to listen, we are going to allow Sean on Ash Wednesday, every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. At the end of the show, we're going to have 3 questions from the audience. All we ask is please do not ask any questions. If we've ever shot anybody, have we ever killed anybody? Don't ask those type of questions. Ask any questions related to street gangs, prison gangs, narcotics, cartels, PTSD, which is something that we all always talk about on the show, and any law enforcement questions. We're not going to we're not going to answer political questions or personal questions, but those other 5 topics, please ask them. And every Wednesday, we as a team on Ash Wednesday will be answering those questions. And we also have tomorrow, we have this journalist, Grant Gruber. He's going to talk about the Aryan Brotherhood. We're going to show a lot of pictures, and I believe we're going to show a little video about the Aryan Brotherhood, their trial, the crimes they committed. It's called the Sacramento Trial. It's going to be an outstanding episode. So hopefully you're going to join us tomorrow. It's going to be a great episode. I can't wait. It's going to be great. Benny, any last words?
Just the guys that are still out there, man. Be aware of your surroundings. Recognize those pre-attack indicators, man. Watch those hands. It's not the eyes that kill you. It's going to be the hands. Trust your instincts. Communicate well. Utilize backup. And one of the most important things right here, health and fitness, and know how to manage stress and mental health. That's so key to our job,
And guys, like I always say, you know what? Live a purpose-driven life. Live every day like it's your last day on earth. And you know what? Trust the process. No matter what you're going through, no matter what it is. I mean, I could go through, it could be a sickness, it could be pain and sorrow, it could be a divorce, it could be problems in your home, with your children, with your wife, etc. Trust the process, but above and beyond, trust the author, the one that has everything under control. And our author is Jesus Christ. Trust the process, but above and beyond, trust the author. We'll see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock on Ash Wednesday. Have your drink, whether it's tequila, whether it's bourbon, or whether it's water. We don't care. Just join us because it's going to be an outstanding episode on the Aryan Brotherhood. With that said, we will see you tomorrow, and we'll see you next week. God bless you. Be safe.
No hay método escrito.